So, efficiency has become kind of an increasingly important feature for many these days. How have you or Regal Rexnord seen use and development of more efficient components and systems increase in, maybe the last couple of years and what's been driving this?
Yeah, efficiency is a funny term. It's kind of almost like a buzz term today, right?
Mm,
You think about efficiency in many different ways. Efficiency in terms of, say, like an electric motor and its energy consumption, right? And electric motors have been increasing in efficiency over the decades, probably since the 80s when it was at its worst. And that was in a desire to lower the electrical energy consumption required to do some sort of mechanical motion. So that's a traditional kind of form of efficiency. You also have efficiency in terms of a system where all of the different components required in a mechanical electrical power transmission system. You might have motor, gearbox, clutches, belt drives. Each one of these mechanical components lowers the overall efficiency from the input power to whatever you're trying to transmit, right? That obviously adds cost to the system, it adds maintenance to the system. So we're getting requests from customers to help them try to minimize the amount of components that go into a power transmission system so that you kind of can peel away some of those inefficiencies, just by the nature of having fewer components that take you from, again, your input power to whatever your shaft output is, increases the efficiency of the system. And again, it comes down to pretty much everything comes down to the same thing, right? You've got an electrical input power going into a motor, and then you've got some sort of shaft that is typically stepped down in speed, and that speed, that torque, that requirement of whatever you're driving, you want to minimize the losses in that system. We're also getting increases in requests for efficiency in terms of things like logistics or supply chain, right? There is efficiencies in that as well. We've had a lot of companies tell us that they like the fact that we have continued to expand our portfolio and include more products in our portfolio, because then they can come to us with things like consolidated shipping, where they're not having to source from 7 different companies. They're not having to logistically manage the deliveries of all these 7 companies, 7 POs, all that kind of thing. And there's efficiencies to be gained there. So
mm.
there's a lot of different forms of efficiency that we're getting requests for. And again, they kind of all come down to cost, right? And trying to make things as cost effective as possible. And that cost goes beyond the initial capital investment you would make on parts, and more about total cost of ownership, thinking in lifetime type costs.
So, maybe beyond those costs, what are maybe some of the other benefits from developing or offering more efficient components and systems that you guys are seeing?
Yeah, so maintenance is another one. If you can, as an example, there was a winch that we did for a marine vessel, and the customer came to us and they said, "Here's our current design. Can you help us with this?" The design inherently has inefficiencies that require us to maintain it more frequently. Like, it had a belt drive. The type of electric motor that it had, coupled with a gearbox, the gearbox required maintenance, lubrication, and things like that. And as you can imagine, on a vessel, on a marine vessel, they don't want to have to do that stuff
Mm,
on the water, and
right.
nor do they want to increase the amount of time they spend in dry dock doing maintenance activities. So they said, can you help us with this? And we redesigned it. We used a servo motor, we used a braking system to eliminate the belt drive, and we consolidated the components. So what we ended up with was a 66% reduction in the components in the system. That inherently increased the efficiency of it from an operational standpoint. That lowered the amount of fuel that they needed to consume to operate the winch. And again, as you can imagine, like diesel fuel and all that, they want to try to minimize that from a sustainability standpoint, but also, again, from a cost standpoint. But then the real benefit for them was there were fewer components that required routine maintenance. Belt drives are inherently a maintenance heavy item. You got to retension the belts periodically. You got to change the belts periodically. So maintenance is another big component to increasing the efficiency of something.
And so, are you maybe seeing a shift to other types of technologies as well to
Yeah,
help aid efficiency gains? Or do you have any examples of that you can offer, or what you've
yeah.
maybe seen?
So let's talk about the outdoor mobile power industry for a minute. So think of like your forklifts and your backhoes and excavators and those types of construction equipment. They're historically, traditionally hydraulic, diesel-driven engines that operate these things. And there's a sustainability play, I think, that goes hand in hand with some of this technology shift. But again, there's efficiencies. If you think about the electrification, even the auto industry, right? Electrification, right now, with the way battery technology is, it's not yet at a point where you can just completely eliminate an internal combustion engine like a diesel engine, particularly in this outdoor mobile power sector, because where a car, if you got to stop at an electric charging station, so be it. They don't have those on job sites, right? So they really need to try to increase the efficiency of the power transmission system as much as possible to minimize the amount of energy they need from their batteries. And electrification of hydraulics is something that we're currently in the midst of working with some OEMs to develop technologies for. And this is an example where, if you think about, again, hydraulics, that's oil based, that
Mhm.
there's a sustainability play there. If something gets cut and you spill oil onto a job site, it goes into the ground. So they've got cleanup efforts they have to take and things. They're noisy, they're very loud systems. So there's that element to it as well. Um, but yeah, I mean, in terms of technology, we're trying to work with them right now. We've got a few of our businesses that have different technologies like linear actuators and things like that, that we're creating new systems that are constrained to existing footprints. So, and by that I mean, again, if you think about a hydraulic system on, let's say, a forklift, right? There's lots of infrastructure in place of these forklifts with the designs of their lifts, and the hydraulic systems have been designed with in mind for these applications. And shifting that now, we don't have the same footprint, right? We just don't have hoses. We have like a linear actuator that is a physically bigger component. There's an electric motor driving it and other components that go into it that are sized differently. So, and some that are designing from scratch with that in mind, we can develop solutions that meet them. But in the retrofit world, we got to kind of fit packages to what their designs are. So that's requiring some innovation on our part to try to reinvent our current components to meet some of the spatial requirements of some of these applications.
So do you see, because we cover so much on the hydraulics and pneumatic side, as well as those, electric technologies that are coming to play, do you see potentially a more of a marriage of the technologies coming together to help with efficiency as
Yeah.
well? Or
Yeah,
yeah.
like short term, we're all about hybrid right now.
Mm,
And one of the solutions that we developed from a hybrid technology standpoint was, again, because of that battery challenge, right? We
mhm,
couldn't eliminate the diesel electric or the diesel engine altogether, but a hybrid diesel electric combination was the best solution in that instance, because you get the benefit of the electric system where you can shrink down the size of the diesel engine, and shrinking down the size lowers the amount of fuel they have to consume, but also the noise. A lot of
mm,
these systems, if you think about, just even think about your neighborhood, right? If you've got a neighborhood where they're doing a whole bunch of construction,
mhm,
these things are loud, and there
yeah.
are bylaws around when they can operate.
Mhm,
So if you can extend their window of operation time, because these things become much quieter and they're not obstructing anybody's enjoyment of their houses, of their spaces, that increases their productivity and that helps them get more profitable. And we're working with them to kind of get that sweet spot of hybridization going on right now, again, until we can fully translate over to electric.